And I think the significance of a book in our hands, a physical book in our hands, still is a statement of sorts. And it's been very funny. A lot of authors who are from Bombay, they choose to reserve the rights because they know someone who's an AD at some production house.
They're like, oh, I'll through my personal contact, I'll get something.
Yeah. The privilege of actually being able to represent an author's work and try and find new life to it,
Welcome to another episode of The Book People, where I demystify India's media and publishing industries and uncover the latest developments and the biggest opportunities for writers and creative professionals in India today. I'm your host, Aishwarya. So I'm a writer, book editor, podcast producer, overall media professional, and the head of originals at Bound. Last week, I was speaking to Arcopol Chaudhuri, who is the executive editor of Rights and New Media at HarperCollins. And we were talking about how publishers are investing more into audio, creating audiobooks, and into pitching books for screen, and what is the big opportunity that publishers are also seeing in this new sort of fluidity that is emerging between the different industries. This was one of the most honest conversations I've ever had on The Book People, and it was really amazing. So Arcopol talks about, what kind of revenue HarperCollins is making from print books versus audiobooks. And he addresses a very important phenomenon that is happening in the industry right now, where a lot of authors are choosing to keep their audio rights with themselves and keep their screen rights with themselves instead of signing them off to the publishers, which means that the authors would rather take the book once it's published by themselves and pitch to audio platforms and to production houses in order for their books to be adapted into different formats. So Arcopol addresses, what this trend means for publishers, and he provides really a publisher's perspective on why he thinks that publishers should be able to keep these rights and help authors ultimately get their books out on different platforms. And he also shares some really memorable moments with his own career in publishing and his journey from journalism to editorial. So let's tune in.
What is currently HarperCollins' revenue portion, as in how much revenue is HarperCollins getting from print versus audio versus ebooks?
I haven't actually checked what's the latest sort of numbers on that, but safe to say it comes from print. And I think ebook and audio would be, very less. Not because, we haven't promoted ebooks or audiobooks in a way, but it just so happens that the distribution mechanism or visibility of bookstore or people's preferred mode of purchasing a book is still very much
print.
So Nielsen brings out a book scan data, but India is one of the few markets in the world where print book sales have been pretty robust. I believe the number could be anywhere between 12 to 16. I don't recall it immediately. That's the rate of growth we're sort of seeing in print sales. Whereas in the US or the UK, it's a pretty saturated market, So, it's largely single digits over there. And I wouldn't say it would be upwards of 5%. But it's very important to recognize that in India, as literacy rates improve, more and more people every year are also being introduced to books. They are probably picking up the classics first, say The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. In India, a lot of book consumption at the moment is on books that improve their lives or books that help them figure out how to get rich. I mean, I'm perpetually surprised how much the intelligent investor continues to sell. And it's not the first book you go for because it's called Intelligent Investor and it's a fat book. It's about 400 odd pages. But people are constantly trying to improve their lives and get better at what they do and, upskill in some ways or the other. I remember Word Power Made Easy at one point of time was the highest selling, book in the country. And that kind of indicated how much in India you want to get better at English. English was your wildcard entry into, the good life.
Yeah.
I say was, but it's still the reality of it.
Still is, yeah.
Still is.
It's very interesting. There are a lot of podcasts as well. Like in your top 5, there'll always be a podcast which is just purely teaching English,
Sure.
right? Like your basic learn English words, or like
Yeah.
every episode is like a new English word and then explaining the word
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
usage. So I think, people are still very heavily sort of focused on learning English. And I think
Yeah.
even for your exams, right, like your SATs, your CATs, you need that. Like one of the preparation people do is to brush up on English, to brush up on
Correct.
vocabulary.
Correct.
So I think that
Correct.
again,
Yeah.
huge audience.
And I think in India, people are finding novel ways to teach English. So you've probably seen Gaurav Motive Groom on Instagram. You don't know probably that the clip is meant to be a lesson in a certain English word. In India, we have so far evaded a recession is because it's still an aspirational lifestyle. People are working hard to constantly improve their lives and, consume, make themselves better, look for the next big opportunity, look for another job or, change or whatever. I think that is reflecting in the kind of books that are also being purchased. For us, like the Almanac of Naval Ravikant, big seller. I mean, it's not a book that's sort of very directly telling you what's it about. I mean, it's not saying how to get rich, or it's a title which is unusual. It's complicated. You don't know what it's about. It's not a colorful looking book. It's a white book with difficult words.
I see it on Audible all the time. Every time I open Audible, it shows up in my recommended suggestions.
And it features a person who's probably not in your face on Insta. Like he's not really showing up on Insta Reels all the time, but it's a steady blockbuster which has worked on its own merit. The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck by Mark Manson. Mark has not visited sort of India, and ever since sort of the book has been selling, but it's such a huge sensation in terms of it's not only the book that one needs to read, it's also a book that one needs to be seen with. You kind of making a statement holding that book in your hands, and so it's sort of served multiple purposes. You can't do that with an audiobook or a Kindle book, right? You can't show it off that way. And I think the significance of a book in our hands, a physical book in our hands, still is a statement of sorts in a country
where it's an extension of your identity, right? Like me reading a particular book says something about my beliefs or where I stand, or asserting that space, I think, publicly.
Correct.
Like if you see someone reading a book on the metro, in the train, you're like,
I was just going to mention that it's a conversation starter. If I see you holding a book in your hands, someone might just, in an act of friendliness, might ask, how's the book you're reading, But if you are plugged in and I don't know if you're listening to an audiobook, what are you doing? You're probably listening to music, you're listening to a podcast, I don't know. If you're holding a Kindle in your hands, I think a lot of people in the country still don't know what the Kindle is.
It just looks like a tablet, or
it looks like a tablet,
electronic device.
Yeah. So it's very private and personal, but a book is sort of, you're really sort of making a statement. It opens conversations. I, for example, I never travel without a book in my hand. So even if I have a doctor's appointment, I'll have at least a book in my bag, so that while I'm waiting, I'm reading. And I think the number of people you see nowadays carrying a book or reading on public transport is not as much as it used to be. I travel by the metro, and most people are watching an OTT platform or a show, with their earphones on. And I'm often asked, do people read nowadays? I mean, I barely know anyone who reads anymore. But I hear them, but I'm saying that the data that we're getting from Nielsen and our own data suggests otherwise. I think the print sales are pretty robust. I think it will take some doing before ebook and audio form a more aggressive part of that whole share of revenue. I must credit the very good ecosystem of booksellers, curated booksellers, independent stores, retail chains, who have made that effort to ensure that books are available and accessible to you. And one example I want to quote is Bhari Sons, which is a very well-regarded bookstore chain, primarily originating from Delhi. At a time, I remember in Bombay, for example, after Strand shut down, and I think a number of other bookstores in smaller bookstores, they shut down, and we thought, oh my God, what's happening to the future of the independent bookshop? But I think in Delhi, for example, we've seen a different trend. So Bhari Sons, for example, has launched more outlets post-pandemic.
Yeah.
And it is such a great vote of confidence to say that here is someone who's cares about books and is passionate about investing more in making sure the books get available. And it's a very well curated sort of a selection. So they recently launched a store in Kolkata in Park Street, and Park Street already has its own share of bookshops. But I have spoken to people in Calcutta, and they say that the curation that they've brought is a lot more nuanced than what Calcutta needed for a long time. So it needs that insight and thinking before you expand, I think. And so I think credit to the whole ecosystem for allowing books to continue to flourish.
Yeah, even Champaka I find very interesting.
They
also opened a branch in Goa.
First
store was in Bangalore.
Correct.
And during the pandemic, obviously they launched their subscription boxes, which again very interesting, right? Because they're still like selling print books.
Correct.
But by creating that subscription box and like showing off the curation of that subscription box, right? Again, I think very interesting model for readers to be very engaged and sort of having that trust in Champaka in a way to curate and give them books that they would like.
Sure.
Because it's taking a little bit of that selection power away from the reader, right? I think very interesting things happening.
Correct. Even in Delhi, for example, Kunzum, they've launched a chain of stores and they're expanding. So they have a policy of, if you buy a book, the coffee is on us. So it's a very simple proposition, and you can just sit, relax, and have a cup of coffee before you exit the store. It's a pretty neat model.
Also, a lot of experts suggesting that authors retain audio rights, right? I think Meghna Pant was one of the first people to start talking about this, where, she also suggested that if authors retain audio rights or retain screen rights, then sort of approach these audiobook platforms or approach producers themselves, in a sense, like try to make more money or, keep the revenue that they would get from those audiobook sales or the screen sales to themselves. Is that something that you're seeing very actively happen with authors that HarperCollins is signing up? Like, are you seeing this trend of authors wanting to retain audio rights and screen rights?
It's a conversation that we're hearing a lot more of. I think theoretically, this is the way I think it should work. If you've already got a screen deal on the story's merit before you approaching a publisher, by all means, continue with the screen deal. Or you've got strong active interest from a producer who's, going to offer money for your story. And the producer doesn't care that it's just a story. It's not a published book. I think that's fair. I think once a book is submitted to a publisher and the publisher acquires to publish it, I think the screen adaptation becomes a derivative of the book itself. And I think by that logic, I think the publisher should have a tiny percentage of the revenue that is being made from the screen deal. And the percentages sort of vary from publisher to publisher. We have a very fixed sort of it's like an agent fee, that sort of a fee. We're not saying we're entitled to it. It's something we earn because we're investing in the printing of the book, we're investing in the editing of the book, we're investing in the distribution and other things. We are giving that manuscript a certain legitimacy and giving it a shelf life. And by virtue of the fact that a publisher has published the book on merit, we are sort of giving the producer a vote of confidence, right? Or the book is getting a sort of a vote of confidence.
Yeah.
And the publisher and the producer feels, okay, if HarperCollins thinks that, this is a book that they've, published, acquired and printed. So some thinking must have gone into it to say that this book will have a readership. And if this book will have a readership is what Harper is thinking, then I think at least I'm 20% convinced right now that this story might have a viewership. So the assurance of readership is giving way to the assurance of viewership. And I think that is the publisher's hard work that's sort of, bringing that to fruition. And I think that's why I think the publisher is probably right in sort of saying, hey, we'd like to retain the screen rights. And in any case, at least the process that we follow at Harper is that we're not restricting the author from pitching their book and having the conversations with the producer. We're saying, let's both of us do it. And if a deal comes through, great, but we'll keep communicating and see what's the best we can do. So an author looking for it on an individual capacity versus an author looking for it and the publisher looking for it and publisher using its own network and contacts. I think you're getting the best of both worlds. And you can do it with a publisher that has a proper outreach, for screen rights. For example, we at Harper, we have a proper outreach for screen rights. You have a dedicated person for it. So if you're an author who's probably thinking, should I grant the screen rights and, to a publisher? These are the questions you should be asking, like, are you going to do a proper outreach with it? What happens if you bring a deal and I don't like it? And what happens if I bring a deal and, and I think those conversations can be had at the time of, the book being signed up by the publisher. I think it's important to acknowledge that it is really the author's book and you are only helping find a producer for it. I think a publisher might feel a bit shortchanged when, the author is reserving only specifically the screen rights and giving everything else to it, because, there is obviously that sense of, oh, I could make, the full money and keep it all to myself. Why should I share any of it with the publisher? But I think the publisher, and, at the heart of it really, the publishing house is a big organization. It's, it's earning at a different level, and not probably parting with those or not having those rights is not going to make a huge dent in the publisher sort of, space. But I think as a relationship, the fact that a publisher has invested and, shown certain faith in the book, the publisher expects that whatever derivatives emerge from the book, it will have some, ratio of the deal value that sort of comes its way. It just sort of makes it feel fair in my view. I think coming to the audio question, I think, you can think of, if you want to, have the whole, you can produce the audio yourself as an author, or you want to independently work with one platform and they'll do it for you. You could have that conversation with the platform. But I think what the publisher is bringing to the table is that your book is going to be available on all platforms. And I think at the end of the day, an author would want that. They would want their work to be as widely available as possible. So sure, you could have one platform offering them, X royalties, a very attractive sum, and, that's it. There are no royalties, nothing after that. But I think a publisher, by virtue of being a royalties-based model, is a lot more transparent in terms of what sales are coming from what platforms. And also, it's a derivative of the book. It's not like, it's a separate script that's being written. If it's a separate script you've written and you've written something else for the publisher, sure, you can exploit the separate script for, doing a podcast of your own. But if it's the same script and, a same script that an editor and a publishing house had edited and fine-tuned and clean it up, and all the grammatical errors have been fixed and it's looking, publishable, for you to take that script and, say, hey, I'm just going to, this is mine. I think that feels to me a little unfair to the effort that's gone in. So
that's fair. I think it's just purely, it comes down to money, right? Like, because essentially, for authors as well, obviously publishing a book, like realistically, doesn't, like, even with the royalty model, doesn't actually give the authors a lot of money, just realistically, because of pricing, because of, what an average book sells.
Yeah.
And I think the discussion simply comes from the point of, if an author can get their book picked up for screen, there's a lot more money that they will get from screen versus book publishing. I think that's where the narrative has started coming from, which is ultimately where is the money coming from more? The money or like the value that they feel like they're receiving for writing something is coming more from screen or is coming more from audio than from book publishing. And so I think it is the idea of, then for them, maybe it is not a derivative, right? Because then it like that is something that they would then maybe want to put more effort in. I think that's where that comes from. But obviously that's why I wanted to get your perspective, because I think it's important to also see, from different perspectives, what the thought process is about. Whether it's audio, whether it's screen. And ultimately, it boils down to how the publisher and the author work together.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, let's say the author is doing the screen deal himself, he's not granting anything to the publisher. He's making $100. If he's granting the rights to a publisher, he's probably making $80 or $90. It's not a huge difference. It's not like the publisher is taking 50% of it and it's half. It is what, say, an agent would take for just making sure the deal is done, the legalities of the contract are all fair. What I've noticed authors doing is that they'll probably reserve the rights for film, and then they'll go to an agent because they feel a bit more confidence with an agent. But the agent again will take some percentages of it anyway. So at the end of the day, he's still getting, not 100 rupees at all. He's getting, he's getting $80 or $90 depending on what the commission is. And also, let's say the author has a lit agent and he's also has a film agent.
Yeah.
He's parting with a commission for, both, or maybe the agents are splitting the commission, depending on what the conversation has been had. But in any case, he's not getting the full money. There are very few authors who right now have had the tenacity to just do everything on their own. They'd say, okay, I'll reserve everything. I'll do everything on my own. I don't need an agent. Sure. By all means, if you want to do it, you can do it. And it's been very funny. A lot of authors who are from Bombay, they choose to reserve the rights because they know someone who's an AD at some production house.
Yeah. They're like, oh, through my personal contact, I'll get something.
Yeah. And I think that personal contact then sort of says, main dikhta hu, and all of those things. It doesn't always sort of work. Whereas what a publisher does, or even say what an agent does, is bring in a lot more structure to the approach. The conversation is between, two equals to say, look, these are it's a conversation between two professionals. There's no personal favor or all of these things coming in. So no one's trying to wing it. In the West, for example, it's a highly agented market. You need an agent to sort of, really even get a publishing deal. It's very tough. And even for a film deal, you have an agent who will have a specialist film person within the agency who sort of, just looks at that. I mean, if you've seen Call My Agent, you'll sort of see that there are multiple kinds of conversations that keep on happening. But yes, I think different perspectives are there to the conversation. I'll give an example. This book called 90 Days by Anirudh Mitra, it's on the Rajiv Gandhi assassination. When the book was brought to us, the author said that, look, I already have a screen deal. The film is getting made. I'm only granting you the publishing rights. You can bring out the audiobook and all of that. But the screen deal is done. So that's fair. And now the show is now in production. It's going to come out soon. So that sort of makes sense. So theoretically, this is what I feel. But it's important to remember that at the end of the day, publishing is a book about publishing books. So even if at times we sort of let the author keep those rights, we do it because we realize, okay, the primary bread and butter for publishers is still the printing and selling of books.
Do you want to work in India's publishing and creative industries and be one of these cool book people that I interview in this podcast? Well, now you can. We at Bound have come up with a 3-month comprehensive online course that gives you the skills and helps you get jobs in your dream companies, whether they are book publishers, magazines, literary agents, digital publishing platforms, or any other content company. So this course starts on 15 September. And essentially in 100 live hours, we will be teaching you every single aspect of the publishing industry, and you will get to specialize in a particular field of your choice. You will learn from over 70 top experts from the industry and a lot of the book people themselves. So imagine you could be learning directly from Sayantan Ghosh, from Naveen Valsakumar, Chitranshu Tiwari, Radhika Timbadia, Disha Nayak, and many, many more experts. In addition to this, you can test your newfound skills in a capstone simulation that we'll be holding at the end of the course. And we will be giving you the chance to actually interview with the top companies in India. So we are hosting a 2-week recruitment drive, and in the drive, you will get to interview with companies like Notion Press, Cactus Communications, Rupa Publications, Little Black Book, and we have over 17 recruitment partners already signed up with us to give you jobs. And I haven't even mentioned the best part yet. We'll only be conducting classes on weekday evenings and on weekends, mornings, so that you can make sure that you can continue your studies, you can keep your full-time job, you can keep your weekend plans while you're doing this course as well. And don't worry, we've also accounted for Diwali and all of the festivals that will come up during those 3 months between September and December. Obviously, you will see me there as one of the core instructors. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to us at Bound India on all social media platforms. You will find the details in the description below. And I really hope that you will take this opportunity and use it to really build your career in the publishing industry and in the creative industries. Apply now.
How many years have you been in the industry today, in the publishing industry?
12.
12.
Yeah.
What has been your best experience in the industry so far and your worst experience?
It's difficult to pick a worst experience. An industry with terrible experiences is one where it would be difficult to
best
be
experience and funniest experience. Let's do that.
Oh, there are a lot of funny experiences, but I'll probably have to think about them. It's the privilege, I think, is the best experience of it. The privilege of actually being able to represent an author's work and try and find new life to it, and I think that really is the privilege of it. I think there are people all around who really envy this job. They would kill to be working in a publishing house. When our new office in Gurgaon, when we sort of launched it, or we sort of moved into the new office, it's a very pretty and attractive office, and a lot of people were posting photos. And
it has the office bookshelves.
It has the office bookshelves. And I think to walk into that office for work and come out in the evening after doing a good day's work, I think is the best part of the job. And I mean it sincerely. And I think our office earlier used to be in Noida, and it was a building just all to ourselves. And there's a distinct smell of books when you enter the office. I think if I could bottle that smell, I could. And I'm sure you must have heard it from tons of readers. And I remember that smell for the first time when I entered publishing. And it was the day when I went to the Prakash Books warehouse in Daryaganj, which is in Old Delhi. And it's a warehouse. So it's full of books, and it's in the basement, which means, there's very little air circulating from. Yeah. So, and I remember I'd heard horrible things about, being in Delhi. I used to live in Bombay in the early part of my career. I think a few movies sort of began to change my view about Delhi. I think one movie was Khosla Ka Ghosla, the other was Band Baja Barat. And I thought, these people are fun. It's not as bad as they made it out to be. I think I still remember that smell when I walked into that Prakash Books warehouse, and I really prayed that I hope I cracked this interview. And they were very kind to me, and I think from there on it's just been just such an honor to just be working with sort of books. There are challenges too. It's not like every day is all hunky-dory. I think what no one prepares you is the pressure. It's a high pressure job. It's got better work-life balance than what I had in, say, journalism, or what say the ad industry has, or I think people overall are gentle and decent human beings. There is no like a toxic work culture in my 12 years. And I'm just speaking of HarperCollins and, even Prakash. It's never been like a toxic work atmosphere. It's never been, because think about it. I mean, these are people who are readers of books, and readers of books generally aren't bad people. They're good people. They're more humane. They have empathy. They have compassion. And if people like that are in an organization, I would expect that at least your co-workers are decent, kind human beings. Of course, there are pressures, there are arguments, there are debates, there are good days, there are bad days. I think the pressure is not something you're prepared for, because at the heart of it, almost all of Indian publishing is hugely understaffed.
Yeah.
So if you, so you work with authors, and you would have heard that how anxious they get when, the response from editors takes time. And and having worked in publishing, I know that, editors are not sort of goofing around in the office. They are really sort of hustling, and they are in the midst of immersive edits, meetings. A lot of editors take work home. And probably had it not been for the joy of the work, they wouldn't have done those edits sitting at home. And really for me, a main part of the job is reading. You have to know your product, what you're selling, when you're identifying what to pitch and sell and push, you have to know the product. So it requires you to read. It requires you to interact with, authors, human beings. So those are things which I think a lot of people who come into publishing, they are a bit surprised by. I think I have a very dear friend with whom I used to often joke that, we used to dream, or we used to think before joining publishing, that we'll come to the office, it'll be a clean, empty desk, and there'll be a stack of printouts, on which you'll just have to just look at it and just mark, just change a comma
very
here.
Glamorous.
Yeah.
Idea of publishing.
Yeah.
Or even the show, Younger.
Yeah.
Which is again based on the publishing industry. Even that, right? Even though they're having a lot of conversations, it's so glamorous. They're talking to people, they're partying.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like, yeah.
So no television show set in any industry will really show a lot of them working. There's a show called The Office, which has people doing nothing apart from just yapping around, and basically it's a show where nobody is allowed to work because of the boss. If you see a show called Mad Men, you will imagine they're always drinking, because they're moving from one cabin to the other. It starts with a drink, it starts with a cigarette, or they're probably going for a long whiny lunch in Manhattan. So even in publishing, for example, I think a lot of people see book launches, and they'll see a very fancy book launch with a lot of attendees. They'll probably feel that the glamour of it is how it really is every day, but it's not. It's really immersive, deep work. It is a lot of negotiation. It's a lot of hand-holding, and authors, you're really taking responsibility for for their baby, sort of. So it is like a daycare of manuscripts, where you're every day you're sort of nurturing it and taking it all the way to publication, and even beyond publication, and ensuring that it's sort of well looked after. I think those are the sort of the pluses and the pressures of the job, but it's kind of tough to trade it with anything else. I think most people you'll see who worked in publishing, they work for fairly long periods of time, because you enjoy it so much, and you feel like there's a certain nobility to it.
I completely agree, because I think so. The way I knew that I wanted to work in the publishing industry is I did an internship with Zuban in Delhi. So I was like staying in Delhi for a few months. I had done the internship. After that, I was short. Till then, I was like, I need to know the reality before I think of whether I want to work in this industry. And then I went abroad. I did a publishing course at Harper. There I interned at Simon & Schuster Canada, and then I came back. So again, like when I came back, I obviously, wanted to work in publishing. That was the thing that I wanted to do. And that's how I first got introduced to Bound. And I started working at Bound as an editorial assistant, and sort of evolved from there. So I was working as a book editor, and then like evolved from there to looking at multiple formats now as a whole. like beyond books as well, right? But I agree with you. It's very interesting because, again, I love The Office. It's at Nariman Point. And again, like very pretty, all the books, huge bookshelf, love working with books. And you get to borrow all the books, which is amazing because you just read books for free. But this is something I notice as well, where, I realize that in publishing or in, the adjacent sort of industries, companies, our roles are very broad. So, which is why I always like asking this question of, what does a day in your life look like? Because no one has an answer to give me for this question, because no day looks the same, right? Like you can't have this thing of, you're doing one job or like you have one role. And so your role is coming to work every day and doing this one particular thing. Everyone will be like, I do this and I do this and I do that. And I think that is also something that is very, related to publishing, where your roles are so broad and you're doing essentially like 3-4 things within one role, which comes from, again, there it being understaffed, but also that just being the nature of sort of the kind of roles that exist, that which I find very interesting. And this is again that something that I want book lovers or book readers who want to work in publishing to know. Because I often come across so many people who love books, but because of that, Bound gets that a lot, where we get people who want to work with books, but they want to have fun. Like you want to work where they think that, okay, you come to work and you just read and you have fun with it, right? Like it's very chill, but it is very high pressure, and it is very, you got to do a lot of things, you got to get things done, and reading is happening, but it's reading and learning. And then there is a lot of reading that's happening not during your working hours, but just reading that you're doing for yourself. I think that balance is, definitely something that people should really know about.
In fact, you made an interesting point, Aishwarya. I think publishing jobs, when you see listings, I think we advertise our jobs incorrectly occasionally. I think one of the lines which we sort of, emphasize on, that you should love books and you should love reading. I think that is not a criteria for the job. That is a given. But I think, let's say for an editor, if you're applying for an editorial position or as a copy editor, you can't, a large part of the job is a cleanup job. You are editing or looking at a manuscript in a very raw format. It's not the most pleasant experience when you're reading it in that format, but you have to be able to have the foresight and the maturity and the eye, and obviously the skill to suggest what is the change that manuscript needs to be a better version of itself.
Not just point out what is wrong, but what it needs.
Correct. So that's a different skill set, and it comes with, I think it comes with with age and a bit of diverse reading across genres. So if you are the person who just prefers to curl up and read, and that's all you've done for most of your life, I would say you probably got a good sense of what grammar, comprehension, punctuation, all of that is there. But it is no guarantee that you will enjoy the process of the cleanup.
Because can you evaluate and can you, analyze a book from a very objective perspective, and then say that this is working, this is not working, or this is in a way like right, or this is wrong, or this needs to be fixed in this particular manner. I think that requires a very different skill set, that ability to evaluate, right, and pinpoint exactly. Versus simply being like, I like this book, I don't like this book. I think the subjectivity again is a huge sort of marker of someone who can work in publishing.
Correct. And when you are a copy editor or just an editor who's working on a book, you won't be assigned a book based on your tastes. You may get a book which is far from anything that you've read, or you probably don't even approach that genre, but you'll have to apply all the logical sensibilities that are required when the right reader for that manuscript will require. For example, most of us in our college years or whatever, growing up, we read fiction. We read the Enid Blytons, we read Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, all of that. We read so little of heavy nonfiction. It's important to acknowledge that right now the publishing industry publishes very little of fiction. the list that most big publishers do right now is largely nonfiction led, and nonfiction that's, leaning on politics, current affairs, biographies, academic books, which, on, the state of healthcare, maybe, and those, and when a young editor sort of joins, and that's something that like there is assigned, that's a bit of a culture shock. They're like, what? I mean, that's not what I read, probably, maybe you've read in the newspapers, but, it's a bit of a culture shock. So I think it's very important to acknowledge that you are not going to be allowed to cherry pick what you edit. Yeah, sure. Maybe you are you have a proven track record in delivering and turning around books that are in the romance genre. So, you probably may get a bit more of that. You may eventually get a bit more of history if you've been doing a lot of history where, there are footnotes, there's an index that's required, there are maps that need to be added. For example, I eventually sort of began getting a lot more books in the genre of sport because, when I was copy editing, I edited books by, say, Shahid Afridi, Sanjay Manjrekar, Wasim Akram, and, so eventually, you are someone who could be sort of, relied upon to say, why don't you sort of lead this project? But when you're starting out, at least for the first 3-4 years, it could be a mix of many things. So similarly, for, say, someone who's applying for a marketing role, we advertise it as someone who needs to love books and just enjoy being with books. But marketing roles don't require that to that extent, because marketing means you have to work under immense pressure and find ways to market the book. You have very little time to really read and understand the book and, read it from cover to cover. That's the reality of the industry. So you should be someone who's good at assessing what are the points in the book that I need to highlight and bring out into the world so that people will buy more copies of the book.
Yeah, like the packaging in a way, right? Like how do I package this book in a way that people will want to pick it up or will find it attractive?
Correct.
And then again, like working with books that you might not personally feel strongly about, or subjects that you don't care about, but obviously you're spending so many hours and hours of time.
Yeah.
Like, just working on this book and trying to convince other people that this book is very exciting, irrespective of your personal preferences as a reader in that sense.
Correct. And I think there's media relations, there is social media, there's analytics. So I think someone who's coming into publishing, who's coming from a non-pure reading background is most welcome. I think as Bound is launching a course, I think I hope a lot of people who apply for the course are people who are
and you're teaching at the course.
Yes, I'm looking forward to that. And I think what I hope people take away is that, people take away this, get a good sense of the industry and what it's like to work in a publishing house. But I hope people also bring their own strengths to it. So if you're a digital marketer with a lot of experience, yeah, sure, great. I think you will have a lot to offer to a publishing house. If you are someone who's done, influencer marketing and who's aware of how to deal with influencers, if you know how to shoot great reels, you're good with, your phone camera, and you're good at someone who's great, at taking photographs. These are all great skills to have. It's not just, about the written word. And there are other departments in publishing, like product. There's sales. There's, the rights and contracts part of it, which could use more fresh, energy. And I think those are things one should also think about. And of course, yes, design. The designing of books is it's a very integral part of the process. So yeah.
You didn't give me a funny story, which I will let it go now.
Okay, I've remembered one.
Okay.
It's funny and it's sad and it's ridiculous. It's all of those things. So when we published Shahid Afridi's memoir, so it's called Game Changer. There was a major typo in the book.
Oh no! After it was printed.
Yeah, it was a major typo in the book. We came to know about it only when it made the headlines. He obviously came into the limelight because of he scored the fastest century in a one-day international match at a very young age. I think 16 is the age which he, that's what's on the record in public imagination on all cricketing records. And I think we when we mentioned the year of his birth in the text, any smart person could have done the math and analyzed that on the day that he played that match, he was not exactly that age which is considered. So basically the headline, and it was a front page headline, so it was a major crisis for us. So we missed catching that when editing the book.
And so what was the error? Was it that his birth year was misprinted?
No, it wasn't misprinted. It was just the incorrect year that was
the correct incorrect year of his birth, or the incorrect year when he played the game?
The birth year was incorrect, which basically implied that he had committed age fraud when playing the match. And it became, there were whole editorial pieces, on the op-ed page, Mr. Asman had written a piece, and, they had done deep articles on age fraud in sport. And at the heart of it, it was just horrible being at the, being the face of that, because I was responsible for the book. As I said, the editor is really the heart of the book and being responsible for it. But for me to commit such a blunder was, I think it was one of the lowest points of my editorial journey. But I think, I must commend my team and, the people here for not letting it, affect me. We didn't get into the blame game and, how could this have happened? How could you let this happen? We went into crisis management mode. We said, we just need to come clean and say, hey, look, this is an error.
Yeah.
And so even
there's no age fraud. There are typos, and then there are typos, and this is just happened to be.
Yeah. So I think most editors will tell you that no book goes to print without a single typo. There is at least one typo. And even if I casually ask a colleague of mine to say, hey, this is your book, right? You edited this? And my colleague's first reaction is, yes, I did. Why? What happened? Did you find a typo? So and after I saw that, no, I have not found a typo. I just wanted to know if you edited this. But typos, these are things that give people, sleepless nights sometimes. And I think people who are experienced in publishing, they know that, there's at least one typo that will creep in from somewhere. There is, I think, not a single book out there which doesn't have at least one typo in it. But it obviously, as an editor, you have to focus on making sure that the typos, errors, all of those things, they go down. They don't happen as often as they should. You are expected to deliver a clean, error-free manuscript. That's one part of the job. And I think really that's why the author is publishing with you, right? The author is trusting your editorial sensibilities and other things. Yeah.
What do you think about, AI? This is the topic of discussion nowadays. So, obviously there are a lot of things related to AI that are impacting books. There are AI written books now that are starting to come up. There are now new softwares, especially for audiobooks as well, right? Like for voice narration.
Yeah.
Where, you give the software like a, I think 30-second, 1-minute audio clip, and then it can sort of have the entire audiobook narration done in that particular voice.
Sure.
Things like that. So what do you think about these developments? Do you think they are helpful? They are threatening? Do you think it's all just overrated?
It is definitely something I'm sure everyone's thinking about, because I think what no one was prepared for is the pace at which the conversations around AI have really, enveloped our world right now. I think, we are in June right now. I don't think we were talking about AI to this degree in 2022 June. We weren't. No. But I think the last 6 months or 8 months, it's really accelerated, and the nature of social media algorithms is such that it can track what you're reading and what you're paying more attention to. So even if your eyes are reading more articles about AI, or you hitting the like button, it'll probably throw more articles about AI.
I'm being bombarded by AI.
Yeah, so that's just
especially Twitter.
Yeah, so
my Twitter is filled with these a lot of people like AI experts who have started putting out these tweet threads which are just like, here are 10 new AIs that have come up this week, and these are all the things that they do. And I just like, I keep unfollowing and like sort of being like, please don't show me any more of these things.
No, you're right. It's exactly the same. I read tweets like, Microsoft Excel is dead. You don't need formulas anymore. PowerPoint is dead, stuff like that. Here are 5 tools, you don't need to you don't need to know Adobe Premiere to edit videos anymore, stuff like that. So I think broadly from a publishing point of view, I think we're curious to see how AI can help the process. I think, and I have a feeling for the editorial or the editing process per se, I have a feeling AI may be a lot more useful for works of nonfiction, where it's pretty, in terms of like a cleanup job, or just making sure the sentences are grammatically correct and it's all working.
Yeah. Do you think AI would make copy editors and proofreaders obsolete?
I don't know. So when a copy editor is editing, he is editing not in isolation. He's editing it with the author. And if the author's word is the final word, I think that's something I don't know if an AI software can gauge right now. But it's a space I'm sure everyone is very keenly observing and looking out. And obviously, dealing with a machine, dealing with a human, there are pros and cons to both of these things. I think specifically in fiction or literary fiction, I am expecting AI to be a bit of a tough or not the right match. Literary fiction tends to be, has a certain personality. It has the writer's touch.
It's difficult to put in a template or in a formula as such for AI to just be.
Yeah. But I'm expecting AI to offer more answers in terms of who's reading my book, how long are they reading for, what is the age profile of someone who's purchased my book from, say, Ludhiana or Lucknow. These are stats I'm not getting right now.
More book selling and reading.
So can technology help make us publish better? That is the answer I'm expecting AI to give me. Can I, so for example, at the moment, you would have spoken to publishers, and you probably know that inventory and stocks that are lying in the warehouse, just making sure the book is reaching the right parts of the country. How can tech sort of help us do that better? How can I intelligently gauge how many copies of a book I must print, and intelligently tell me that, okay, this book is due for a reprint, or these are parts of the book which people have liked a bit more than the others. And I'm saying specifically for print books, because for ebooks and audiobooks, we can get that data provided, Amazon and the platforms, they share that data. So I mean, they're familiar with the data. It's probably not reaching us to the way we want it. But I'd like to know that for the print book, and see if that's helping us. So it's interesting. I must compare how, say, an OTT platform evaluates the success of a streaming show. So the OTT platform will tell you at what point most people have dropped off. So let's say the pilot was great, but I think third episode, people dropped off at this point, or and what they're aiming for is that people who watch the show end to end, who's watched the show in how many hours. So if more people have watched the show in very limited amount of time, which means they've binged watched it. People had to sort of watch the next episode. I'm looking for that sort of data for AI to offer. Now, that's just my point of view. I think for audio specifically, we are already being approached by people who are saying, we can do specific kinds of voices. I'm aware that at least in the UK and the US, where AI is sort of, a lot more part of the mainstream conversation, they have so far not used AI for audiobooks per se. I think it's a conscious decision, I believe, because you have worked with the voiceover narrator community with studios for so long. It's not going to be an easy transition to make. And I think even though the technology may have arrived, which can make you believe it's actually read by a human, I think the way a listener would interpret it is still up, for discussion. To know that it's been narrated by a bot, to know that there was a person behind the mic who narrated it, it's a different feeling. So it's a space where I think everyone's going to be observing very keenly over the next 2 years. But I think in the next 2 to 3 years, one would expect some changes to happen, or maybe a deeper implementation of AI to come in. I think as an industry, certainly we need to embrace tech a lot more than we do right now. We've still not embraced tech the way we should, at least for, say, marketing and other things.
Yeah, definitely. I think being open to the tech changes and sort of seeing how we can use them for our benefit. Like I think Notion Press is currently trying to come up with an audio narration AI as well.
Yeah.
Which, like I said, I think then the idea is that it would copy the author's voice.
Okay.
So essentially for readers, it would be that the author has read out the audiobook, right? Like the narration style and all of those things.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think more focusing on technological advancements that are, I think, reducing the overall cost of production, whether it is for authors, whether it is for publishers.
Exactly. Yeah.
And how those can benefit. But definitely, I think AI is this big question where everyone is panicking a little bit about what is going on. And I think that the changes are happening so rapidly that for any industry to be able to keep track of what is the new thing, or even, like for this series, I interviewed a copyright lawyer, right?
Okay.
So again, the question of copyright that comes up because of AI written books.
Yeah.
Or AI created art, right? Where we already have a lot of books coming out that are AI written, but like what is to stop people from just not saying they're AI written?
Sure.
And then so this question of who owns the copyright, who is actually writing, how do we look at these things?
Sure.
I think all of these questions will keep coming up, which we'll have to just...
It still has to work as a book. It still has to work as a story. It still has to, I mean, the prompts will still need to be given by a human being, right? Like
yes.
The larger story arc
came
has
across
to be,
this article of an author who I think last year, in the last couple of years, has published over 50 books, right? Because he has been able to write the books with the help of AI. Okay. So it is still the author's books, right? It's just that for the author, and he's taking that, like he's owning the fact that he's using AI to write the books. And for him, it's like, okay, the AI is helping me write the books faster.
Yeah.
Right? Like churn out the books in a way that it wouldn't be possible if he was literally manually writing.
Yeah.
I've not read any of the books. I don't know anything. But I'm just saying that, things like that. I think it's more a question of timelines or the process of production or the time that it takes to produce them. Is that going to be affected by AI, which is interesting to look at?
I think it might speed up the process. I think, as I said, tech, if it makes the process more efficient, then I think people will embrace tech a lot more. But personally, just on a very personal level, if someone has used AI to, write, say, an essay, at this point of time, I mean, I would think, you've sort of found an easy way out. I mean, I mean, you make that same author, pit him against, say, an Amitav Ghosh, and let's say Amitav Ghosh does not use AI, he writes the old-fashioned way. I'll probably get the copy signed of the book by Amitav Ghosh, not because the AI is not going to sign the copy, right? He's going to say, hey, it's my story, but the hard yards have been put in by the machine. But it's definitely an interesting time. I mean, and for people who, for example, let's say my English is not great, my punctuation grammar is not great, but I'm someone who can really put in the prompts. I'm great at prompting the machine to craft, and I know the twists and
like
turns.
You have ideas and you know the plot, but you just maybe do not have necessarily the skill set to write.
Sure.
In that sense.
So that can be very liberating, right? I mean, I can really attempt to tell a story without seeming like, hey, I don't know. I mean, I haven't gone to the Iowa Writers Workshop, but I'm using the machine to sort of help me do it. And if I'm declaring upfront that, look, this has been written by me in collaboration with technology, is it something a publisher is open to right now? I'm sure. Yeah, why not? At the end of the day, the editor who's evaluating the story for publishing, for him or her, the story still needs to work. It still needs to be, convincing, emotional, or, whatever you're expecting from that genre. It still needs to be, if it's a crime fiction, it needs to be a well-plotted crime story with a satisfying ending. And I think once, say, a book makes a big dent or makes it in the top of the charts, I think then this conversation will sort of gather steam. Definitely. That still hasn't happened yet.
So now let's go to the last section, which is a rapid fire. So essentially, quick answers. Coffee with Karan format.
What has Coffee with Karan done to us?
Yeah, it's just every podcast ends with a rapid fire.
Sure.
It's the way to go.
Go for it.
Okay. One audiobook that you wish you were involved
in? Not so rapid.
Rapid.
Not so rapid.
Just off the top of your head.
The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck.
Okay. I have listened to that audiobook. Yeah. Okay. If not books, what would your alternate career be in?
Films. Writing of films. Yeah.
Yeah. Would you ever write a book?
I would want to. Yes.
What would it be about?
It would be about a world I'm familiar with. I wouldn't write about something I don't know. So maybe as a publishing professional, if I'm writing a book, it would probably be maybe a bit like Yellowface, a world I'm familiar with. Yeah.
Nice. Okay. One publishing professional who you admire?
Anand Padmanabhan, who leads HarperCollins. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. A recent book you worked on that you want to give a shout out
to? Sultan. It's Wasim Akram's memoir. It's available in print, ebook, and audio. So if you love listening or reading memoirs, this is a memoir that's a very well-written one.
Okay. What are you reading right now?
I'm reading the Ramayana. That's a translation by Ramesh Menon.
Okay.
And I think the recent, controversy, brouhaha around Adipurush made me want to really revisit the text and see it in its, in a better avatar.
Okay. Great. Thank you so much, Arcopol,
for
coming on this podcast and talking to me about all things publishing.
Thank you. I had a great time. Thanks for the very, thanks for the questions and for your insights. It was a pleasure. Thanks.
That marks the end of another episode of The Book People. Tune in every Thursday for some breakdowns, some truth bombs, and some insightful and real conversations with industry experts about all things books. This podcast is created by Bound. We work with writers and brands to create content across formats, whether it's books, podcasts, newsletters, or screenplays. So get in touch to see how we can help you grow through stories. And follow us at Bound India on all social media platforms. I'm your host, Aishwarya. You can follow me on LinkedIn, where I share many more insights about books and content. Or you can get in touch with me at aishwarya@boundindia.com if you have any suggestions on topics I should cover, or if you want to book any of my services or consultation calls. Until then, keep writing.